And of course, with a new year upon us, we do want to take a minute to reflect on some of the biggest issues that impacted agriculture law and finances during 2021. Well, Roger McEowen with Washburn University School of Law joins us now to review his list of the top 10. And Roger, as always, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us here today. First of all, I understand that you have a case from your number 10 case rolls out of Iowa.
It does. This is longstanding litigation against farmers it started in the northwest corner of the state, but it was an attempt by various groups to either have the courts impose directly or have the courts force the Iowa legislature to put more regulation on farmers and ranchers in terms of runoff from farm fields. And the court, under the public trust doctrine, is what the plaintiffs were trying to use. The court said, that's not our job. Get elected officials that will vote those changes in legislatively, but it's not the court's job to override the legislature. So they threw out the case.
So is that decision relevant in other areas of the country?
Well, I think it is. There's been a number of cases across the country in the past 3 or 4 years where groups have tried to use the public trust doctrine to further regulate private property. And this is a doctrine that originated from England, and it said that the seas and the oceans are public property. They can't be privately owned. And so they're trying to apply that doctrine to private land. And we've had a number of court cases, and this is the most recent one, where the courts generally have said, no, that's not our domain. That's not an appropriate way to regulate private property. So I think it's going to be very helpful as other courts look for further guidance on this.
Now, at number 9, you listed the net operating losses. How did that make number 9?
Boy, this has been such an issue over the past 3 or 4 years. Of course, the TCJA that started in 2018 under the Trump administration, that new tax law, shortened the time frame down by which we could carry back farm net operating losses from 5 years to 2 years. Now, there were other benefits of that, but that was a shortened carryback period. Then the virus hit, and we had several pieces of virus-related legislation that said, well, let's go back to 5 years. Well, some farmers had already locked in a 2-year carryback. And the big development in 2021 was that the IRS came out with rules saying, well, if you previously elected a 2-year carryback, here's a procedure for you to get out of that and now carry your losses back 5 years. That is very helpful for many farmers and ranchers across the country in managing their taxes over a longer period of time.
Now, number 8 is one that we've heard on here before, and probably, I bet it's made the list even more than twice, but the ag nuisance litigation.
Yeah, the ag nuisance litigation, particularly in North Carolina, has been going on for a long time. There have been a lot of lawsuits. Of course, it started with Murphy Farms, but basically against large-scale hog confinement operations. And the big point of this case, it derives from the North Carolina legislature a few years ago modifying their right to farm law, which is a law that every state has. It's different in every state, but that's designed to provide protection for farming operations from nuisance suits brought by non-farmers generally. And they tightened their restrictions up, and the development in 2021 was that the Court of Appeals in North Carolina upheld the most recent tightening of the right to farm law against a constitutional challenge. Now, there have been other states, particularly Indiana and Florida, that have modeled their right to farm statutes after North Carolina, and now we've got the North Carolina law upheld as constitutional. And I think if other states want to provide further protections against nuisance suits for farming operations, they can look to see what happened in North Carolina.
I bet this will make a headline again here, without any doubt. Now coming in at number 7, it's another tax-related development, and this one, of course, going into bankruptcy.
Yeah, Chapter 12 bankruptcy, which is just for farmers, has a provision in it that was put in by amendment in 2005 that allows a farmer to what we call deprioritize taxes. Normally, any taxes that you owe the IRS or a state government or municipality have to be paid first. They have priority status, and you have to pay them in full. Well, that created a lot of problems, particularly back in the 80s during the last farm debt crisis. Farmers would file bankruptcy, and even before Chapter 12 had this provision in it, all those taxes had to be paid first. If you sold some machinery, you sold some land off, triggered a tax liability. A lot of farmers couldn't pay that, and so they got forced into a Chapter 7 liquidation. The question that was answered, at least partially in 2021, was whether prepaid taxes, such as withheld taxes by a spouse that's working off farm that have already been paid, can we get those back? Can we pull those into the bankruptcy estate and deprioritize those? The 8th Circuit Court of Appeals said no. The 7th Circuit, involving an Indiana farmer, said maybe, but it depends on how the bankruptcy plan is written.
Okay. And then coming in at 6, it's a matter involving grain sales that came up in the latter part of 2021.
Yeah, this is a really big problem.
Okay.
What hit the headlines in November and then in December was down in the Mississippi Delta area. There were a group of farmers that sold their harvested grain from the fall of 21 to the elevator, not realizing how bad the financial condition of the elevator was. The elevator filed bankruptcy after the grain had been delivered, but before they paid, which makes the farmers completely unsecured.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything that the farmers can do as far as whenever they're caught in that situation?
Well, first things first, I think a farmer should always pay attention and try to get as much information they can concerning the financial condition of any buyer of their grain. Maybe get a certified audit or whatever information you can dig out. You want to know how secure they are financially. And then secondly, we might want to consider the use of escrow accounts or letters of credit. Those are ways, if it's done right, that you can provide protection for yourself.
All right. Well, Roger, as always, thank you very much for sitting down with us. We're going to continue the conversation. Roger McEowen, he's with the Washburn University School of Law, and join us again here in just a few moments as he'll join us here in our next half hour, and we'll hit the top 5 ag developments of 2021 as well.